Hello and welcome to episode 13 of The Australian Runner, a weekly show about running and everything running related. I'm Ben, and with me is Chris.
Hi.
This week's episode is about running watches and tech. Let's get started. There are a whole range of different options for wearable tech out there that a runner can use, with the main ones being fitness trackers, GPS watches and smartwatches. So Chris, why might someone choose to get something like this?
Wearable tech like this allows users to track progress and their health and fitness routines and workouts over the course of the week, which leads into months and then years. So you can track from where you've started to what you're doing now to see whether you're leading a healthy lifestyle, or more specific to running, whether you've started to run further or faster or a mixture of both.
Yeah, I agree with you, and it's really good to set goals and be able to hold yourself accountable. If you say you're going to run 20k a week or you want to do 2 hours of exercise a week, it's really good to be able to know exactly what you're doing as well to help you get better. So wearable tech falls into three main streams. You've got fitness trackers like Fitbits, GPS watches like Garmin's, and then all the different types of smartwatches like Samsung and Apple. Each of these comes with its own advantages and disadvantages. So we'll start off with fitness trackers. The main fitness tracker that I think everyone would have heard of is the Fitbit.
Yeah, of course. Fitbits are good for health purposes. They allow you to track steps, how much you're sleeping, your heart rate, how many calories or food you've consumed, your current weight, and how much exercise you've done over the course of a day.
Yeah, they also can give you reminders like make sure you stand up and move around once an hour and that sort of thing as well if you feel like you're working at a job or doing something where you're sitting down for a long period of time.
They make sure you're not leading such a sedentary lifestyle where you're sitting down all day, definitely.
So some of the main advantages of Fitbits and other fitness trackers is that they can start off relatively inexpensive, much less than $100.
Yeah.
These basic ones usually are basically a pedometer, a bit more of an advanced pedometer, but still basically just the same.
Yeah.
As you can go up in price, you can get things like that inbuilt heart monitor that you mentioned before, and other extra bonus features that you can use.
Yeah, they're really good. Fitbits are really good as a way to track your health. And we're going to talk about running, and they're not quite as good in that area.
Yeah, so most runners would probably want to know how far they've run rather than just how many steps they've taken, and have stopwatch capabilities and those sort of things as well. So that's where it gets let down in terms of running, although for general fitness tracking, they're pretty good.
Yeah, solid.
The next type of wearable is the GPS watches.
Yeah, these are much more specific to running. They can track distance and pace instead of the steps, amongst a myriad of other features and statistics. So GPS watches basically work off the use of satellites orbiting the planet that allow you to determine where the person's wearing the watch. And if you know the location, you can then track and see where they've been over the course of their run to figure out how far they've run. And the time taken between those points allows pace to be calculated. Of course, the stopwatch or the GPS watch does that all for you. And it just makes your life so much easier.
So it means we can track instantaneous pace as well, rather than just saying I ran 2 kilometers in 8 minutes, which meant I went 4 kilometers per minute. This might be able to say, all right, you ran the first kilometer in 3.5 minutes, but the second kilometer in 4.5 minutes. Those sort of instantaneous pace things, because it knows where you are at every point in time. What other features would you get from a GPS watch that you mightn't get from a Fitbit?
One of the best things about GPS watches are that they can track your altitude and whether you're running up and down hills and slopes and whatever. They track how fast you're striding, which is your cadence, your steps per minute. Last week in our video, we talked about aiming for 180. They also allow you to measure your stride length, your VO2 max, navigation of past courses, your calories burnt, your lap time, your total time of your run. They can measure many things, and there's many different versions out there that can track slightly different things. One other thing that they can track is heart rate. Give it instantaneous and an average.
So they're really, really useful. They're packed full of features. Obviously, a lower end one would have fewer features than a higher end one. And that brings us to one of the disadvantages, is that the cheapest GPS watch would start about $200, which wouldn't be unreasonable given some of the things that you get. But the higher and higher you go, they can even push up to $800. Those sort of features that you'll get maybe aren't as useful for most people. I think most runners just want things like where they've run, so a nice map of where they've run, how fast they've run it, maybe heart rate, and their splits for every kilometre.
Yeah, just the basic features are what most runners need.
The final stream of wearables are smartwatches. So smartwatches like the Apple Watch and the Samsung Gear series, these are generally a lot more expensive. They're basically, if you don't want to carry your phone around with you, if you don't think that's comfortable or have a little pad on your arm to hold it, this might be something that you'd look into. So yeah, they're basically carrying your phone around with you. I think on the Apple Watch and the Samsung Gear series, you can use Apple Pay or those sort of contactless card systems. So if you're out for a run, you can buy a drink of water wherever you are without having to carry a wallet. So something like that might be useful. Not all smartwatches, however, are geared towards running and sport. Some are, some aren't. So some might not even have a heart rate monitor. And if you're looking at paying several $100s, definitely more than $500, smartwatches probably aren't going to be the best course of action if you just want something for running. If you're looking at buying a smartwatch anyway, sure, they can be used for running, but if you want something dedicated for running, you're probably better off with a GPS watch.
Overall, we'd recommend a GPS watch, as Fitbits tend to just track health and don't give enough statistics for running, and smartwatches are too expensive and as well don't give many statistics specific to running. They'd be good if you've got one to use running, but don't go out to buy one for running. The GPS watch that is one to recommend is the Garmin 220. I've got one myself. I've used it for about 6 months now. I love it. Easy to use. There's only a few buttons. It's got everything you need. You can use your heart rate. It's just a chest strap for your heart rate, but it connects automatically to your watch, so it's easy to use. The features are fairly advanced, but not over the top. You could pay $700 or $800 for a Garmin Phoenix or something to get a lot of extra features, but most of them aren't that useful. I don't find them interesting. I just really wanted to know how far I've run, my pace, my heart rate, my elevation. And that's what the 220 does. Though that's now stopped production, Garmin now just produce the 230 and the 235, which are slightly more expensive, but they do come with a couple of additional features. The best cheap GPS watch would be the TomTom Runner 2 or Spark. There's a couple of different versions, but they'd be the cheapest ones to get.
I agree with that. On the topic of the TomTom Spark, the cheapest one starts out at about $200, and that can do sleep tracking as well, GPS tracking, 24/7 activity tracking, but you can go up and up in price. For $300, there's a one with a built-in heart rate monitor. The top of the range TomTom Spark actually comes with storage for music. So if you have Bluetooth headphones, you'd be able to connect. So that way you don't have to have a little iPod as well as a GPS watch. I don't have a GPS watch, but if I were to buy one, I'd probably be looking at one of the TomTom Spark range, and if I could scrounge together the money, the one with music would probably be the best way to go for me. So those are just our thoughts on the different pieces of wearable tech that you can use when you run. At the end of the day, we think GPS watches are probably the best for the type of running that we definitely do. But I think that wraps up this first part of our episode. So now I'll pass it over to Chris for this week's running news.
A lot of news this week with many states holding their state championships. First to New South Wales, where Danny Samuels nailed a 66.78 metre throw on her last throw to win the New South Wales discus title, and it doubled as a world champ qualifier for later in the year. In the women's hurdles, West Australia's Brianna Behan in 13.32 won over the hometown favourite in Michelle Janicki. The women's 800 metre brought together two relatively new athletes to the specific event, Rio Olympian Annalise Ruby and Laura Story. In a tactical race, Story prevailed when she won in 2:06, just ahead of Ruby's 2:07, and a special mention must go to 16-year-old bronze medalist Carly Thompson, who ran 2:07 and her second Commonwealth Youth qualifier. The women's 400 metres was won by 16-year-old Benderi Oboya, who in 2 runs at the championships took nearly 2 seconds from her personal best. Will Austin Cray took the 800 metre over the favourite Jared West, and for the second week in a row, Jenny Blundell claimed the state 1500 metre title in 4:13. The 3000 metre steeplechase was an impressive affair for both sexes, with James Impress clocking 8:54 and Vic Mitchell winning in 9:49. Over to Victoria now, and in the open division, Charlotte Wilson and Ben Buckingham took out the 3000 metre steeplechase events. Paralympian Isis Holt won her 100 metres for her classification. The men's open 100 metres was one of the highlights and races of the day, with a dead heat between Joel B and Chris Mitrevsky. As well as that, Joel B looked to have torn a hamstring as he pushed across the line. There was a huge upset in the men's open 400 metres, with Will John beating Luke Stevens. Will Johns has now won the Victorian state titles in 6 different events: the 100 yards, the 100, 200, 400, 4x1 and 4x400 metre relays. Olympian Morgan Mitchell was a late scratching for the women's open 400 metre final. She did run the heats and the semi-finals, but pulled out. So the door was wide open for somebody to claim the victory, and that happened to be Abby Delamotte. To Queensland now, Liam Adcock won the men's long jump in a tight affair, just ahead of Shamima James with a jump of 7.9 metres. Talia Whistle won the women's 100, and Simon Gregg won the men's 100. Ella Connolly won the women's 400 metres ahead of Rio Olympian Caitlin Jones and Dipna Prasad, an international visitor. Sally Pearson, back on home soil, won the state title in the 100 metre hurdles in 13:57. Alexander Hartman, fresh from the Nitro Series, won the men's 200 metres in 21:30. Now heading over west, Declan Carruthers took out the state title in the men's pole vault, ahead of Curtis Marshall and Stephen Clough with 5 metres 30. Matt Ramsden won the men's open 1500 metres with a time of 3:48. Aaron Bresland won the 100-200 metre double for the men's, and Julia Phillips won the 100 metre women's state title. Nina Kennedy took out the pole vault ahead of Elizabeth Parnov with a jump of 4 metres 55, which is a world champs qualifier for later in the year. Overseas now, and Heidi C ran a 1 second 800 metre PB at the Auckland Track Classic, clocking 2:03.5 seconds. Josh Ralph won easily in 1:47.75, and Brett Robinson won the 5K in 13:22 ahead of his training partners in David McNeil and Stuart McSwain. There was one announcement during the week where the first 4 race walk selections for this year's World Championships were announced. The 2 women receiving the nod were Regan Lamble and Becky Smith, and for the men, Ryden Cowley and Dane Bird Smith. The team will be finalised in July. And that's the news for this week.
Thanks for that, Chris. That's it for the show this week. We hope you found it useful. Thank you everyone for listening. You can find us on YouTube as The Australian Runner, and check us out on Facebook and Instagram too. See you next week.
See you then.